This is Full Coffers with your host, Phil and Toni Buggs from Abundant Harvest Christian Fellowship Ministries.
And this week on Full Coffers, The Journey, Part 16. Well, we're back.
We are back.
Now, let me say something really quick. Remember back in the day of radio, and I'm definitely dating myself here, but in the 70s and so one of the things that we'd love to do, especially as young people, we would love to call the radio station, particularly at night, and we would like to make a dedication. And so I'd say something when you could get in, I'd like to dedicate this song to my boyfriend. And, they'd pick this song and you'd hear your name over the radio and be like, yeah. Well, I want to dedicate this podcast. I know it's something not done much in podcast world, but I wanted to go back a little bit. And I wanted to dedicate this particular podcast to the famous author, Langston Hughes.
Ooh.
Langston Hughes, as you know, great author, poet, and there was one poem that he wrote, and it was called Mother to Son. And in the poem, the mother was talking to her son about life. And one of the quotes she made in that poem was, "Life for me ain't been no crystal stair." And what she was trying to tell her son is that life hasn't been easy, but she didn't allow circumstances to stop her. Well, we're going to find out in this episode that life for us ain't been no crystal stair. No, it hasn't, because last time we left you off with our daughter Kyle.
Yes.
I had said, Kyle can't come back home for 3 days because, I need a break, So what ended up happening, we got together at a restaurant, and myself and Philip and Kyle and my son, we went to IHOP and we kind of talked it out, and we talked through some things, and we came to an understanding, and Kyle was able to come back home. And so she came back home and finished out her year at high school, and she graduated. She had already been accepted into Middle Tennessee State University, and she was going to be majoring in music. Can't remember specifically. I don't know if it was music production. I can't remember. Do you know?
Yeah.
It was in music.
It's been a fog since then.
Exactly. But she did graduate. Now, I'm going to be very transparent here.
As if she hasn't been all this time.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to admit something, and that is because we had such a rocky, probably the last 2 years, more so in her senior year, I didn't have the opportunity to enjoy the momentous occasion of her graduating. This was our firstborn kid that had, worked very hard, 12 years, and she graduated. And that should be a happy occasion, and it was.
Yeah, according to our crystal stairs.
Yeah. But for some reason, I just couldn't get into it as much as I probably should. And again, in transparency, the last year was just rough, and it was almost like a relief. Okay, she graduated. Now she's going to head off to college, and I'll get this next one out, and you and I will be back together again, and we'll carry on. Now, looking back at that was such a wrong attitude to have. This is our firstborn. We should have been happy despite the situation that we were going through. But again, I had a lot of misgivings, and I became very disengaged with the graduation process, even with the college process, because when she was ready to go to school, you pretty much carried the ball on that because I disengaged.
There's so many things that come to mind when you were saying that, but I think that probably one of the biggest things right now is, as you're listening to this, is that Toni and I are at least 30 years older now than we were then.
You had to say that, right?
I did. And the reason why I bring that up is that we are telling our journey with being armchair quarterback knowledge. And so what Toni is admitting is that back when we were going through this, we're talking 2000, so I
I was 38.
Yes, and I was 40, so it's 20 years, at least 20 years ago. So we're telling this through those lenses, and like Toni was saying, that it was transparent. It is transparency in that we didn't have this knowledge as we're telling this story, so we are admitting our flaws as we're stepping through this. And the reason for that is to encourage and to let young parents who are going through it now understand that, like she had said, it ain't been no crystal stairway, but you're gonna make the mistakes. And if I say it's okay to make the mistakes, I think it's more so. It's impossible to dot every I and cross every T. So as we share this, we're speaking more of just what we see in hindsight, how it could have been better.
Yeah.
So as Toni is sharing about what she was doing at the time, I don't think Toni was aware that that was what she was doing. And I'm not absolving myself from any special enlightenment at that time. So that's the context of why there was some hesitation, because I think it is wise for us to let the listening audience know that we're speaking about ourselves, as in Time to Kill, outside of ourselves, looking down at ourselves. So that's what this is about.
So it's kind of one of those things where if I could talk to myself, if I can go back in time as myself now and talk to myself, I would say, give her a break. Give her a break. She made a mistake. Okay, give her a break. But again, I'm going back on what I knew at the time. Sure. What I knew at the time was graduations, particularly in the African American culture, it's a wonderful experience, and you celebrate and you're happy, and all your friends want to get tickets to the graduation. Unfortunately, it wasn't like that. And I don't fault my daughter. I fault myself, because I should have been more engaging despite the year that we had, because this was a wonderful occasion.
To go along with that, if we say in hindsight, we're hard on each other, but I think there's a component that we didn't bring into the equation. That was what we thought life should be.
Right.
God never told us, yes, this is definitely going to happen, or this is definitely not going to happen. He's letting us make these life choices and life either rewards or consequences, because he's teaching and training us as we're navigating through life. We thought that our children's life would mimic what our lives were.
Wrong. Wrong. So wrong.
and I believe God, and we speak that in those terms of endearment, because we have the kind of relationship with God based on that, is that we're honest when we say, God, isn't it supposed to be like this? And God would say, I never said that.
No, he did.
What I did say, I would be with you.
Yeah, he did.
Because he didn't tell us, because they're definitely going to need me. But that's the context and the kind of purview that we're sharing this journey with you. We're looking back, but we are recognizing that at the time we're going through it, we didn't have these little notes.
Exactly.
So yeah.
So she again graduated, and Philip was very instrumental in getting her to college. The school was about maybe 30 minutes away from Nashville, and so got her to college, went to orientation, and to my embarrassment, I didn't participate in any of that. I was just in my feelings, and I just didn't participate. And I do regret that, but I was just spent. What I thought should have happened, as Philip said earlier, didn't happen. And I'm sitting up here trying to figure out what on earth went wrong.
And what's going through my mind as this is all playing itself out, again, I had no background knowledge that Toni was pulling back. I just took it as, okay, let me just chime in. It's one of those things where as parents, you just chime in.
You tag team, basically.
Yeah, so I tagged him in. And because I remembered my experiences at Western and how devastating they were, I wanted to be involved with Kyle's involvement. And some of the things they did really great was they invited parents to come in and observe the before you get into college, and we went around the campus, and I know a lot of parents do that. My parents didn't have that opportunity, but I'm sharing from this point that I stayed involved for the both of us.
Exactly.
So it wasn't like, well, Toni's she's just lost it, I'm a dude. No, it was more so, I'm a parent just like Toni's a parent. Let me do what I know to do.
And at that time, I think I just needed that break. Yeah. And really for the better in some ways, because I probably would have made everybody miserable anyway. So
Toni was still going through her. And again, I'm not just saying it's that I had it all together, but more so that Toni was developing and going through a transformation in her life and having to deal with the loss of a relationship with her daughter that she figured this is the way it was going to be. And now granted, when we get to our son Philip, I had no special insight either. I made those mistakes as well. So I just want to share that. If I'm beating a dead horse, do I apologize? No. Because that's Phil. That's just right. Where I am. Yeah.
Now, back at the Ponderosa, we still had one kid left there, and that's our son, Philip Jr. And in the last episode, we indicated that he was able to pass the re-entrance exam, wink, wink, and get back into school. And so he began his senior year, and he, went through classes. He did well, stayed out of trouble. And again, his aspirations after high school was to go into the military. That's something he had talked about all through high school. And so we were coming up on that component where we had spoken with a recruiter. We were going to get all set and sign up. But all of a sudden, something started to happen with Philip where he was starting to question whether or not he actually wanted to go into the military.
I agree.
And I can tell you now, that floored me. In fact, it scared me to death because, one, we had not prepared Philip to do anything else but go into the military.
Yep.
Philip, although was smart and intelligent, very capable of going to college, but that just was not on his things to do. So we're thinking, what the heck is this boy going to do if he doesn't go into the military? So we're sitting up here like, what's happening? What's going on? Why don't you want to go into the military?
Isn't that what you said?
Exactly.
Now,
exactly.
And if I say in hindsight, looking at that situation, we should have, what we knew about law enforcement, which was really the end goal of Philip's progression, what we knew about law enforcement was very limited. We didn't have, and if I say I didn't have men that I could call and say, hey, what's being a police all about? What is that all about? I only understood that most law enforcement people or personnel had military background. A lot of them, at least that was my impression of it. So it seemed logical for Philip to go into the military to get that kind of discipline and training and things. So that's why we channeled Philip in that direction. And to some degree, when we started to sense that Philip was having second thoughts about this,
and we weren't listening. And we had to remember also the war in Iraq was going on.
True,
so
yes.
He would have to actually go into battle. So being an 18-year-old boy, maybe that kind of like, maybe I don't want to do that.
Because I did clearly understand that when you go into the military, your first job is defense of this country. Now, at the time, since it was a wartime enlistment, if I say it like that, volunteer, there were a lot of incentives being passed out to individuals who would enlist, would volunteer. But what happened was that, I shouldn't say what happened, what I had to keep in the forefront of Phil's mind was, yes, there's all these incentives, all these monetary incentives, but you need to clearly understand your first job is defense of this country. Your first job is that you are government issued that your first mandate is to go where they tell you to go. Now, they're going to give you bennies afterward, but believe me, they're going to get theirs out of you. So that was something that we recognized, that I think we saw it, even though we didn't have to go through it. Philip saw it, and he recognized he has to go through that. So that's where the second
and so once we kind of talked to him a little bit more, and encouraging him, he said, okay, that's fine. Well, a dilemma that came across was that there's a weight requirement for the military. And as an 18-year-old boy, working in a fast food restaurant, what do? You eat fast food. And, and being in Tennessee with all that good soul food, you put on some weight. So there was a weight requirement that, initially when he talked to the recruiter, he made it. But unfortunately, he gained some weight. And so the recruiter says, hey, your date of June is coming up pretty soon, and you need to lose about 20 pounds. I forgot how much it was. 12 pounds. Yeah. But it was something that he had to do in a very short amount of time. Yeah. So Philip had to put it in gear. And I must admit, I'm very proud of him for gutting it out, because that boy got up and he went with his recruiter, and they would go on these 4 or 5 mile runs. He put preparation H and cellophane around his gut to shrink the fat around this. I don't have no idea what that's about, but it worked. It did. He did everything. He ate tuna fish basically every day. Yep. And to the end, he made the weight requirements. He did. And we were so proud of him for sticking it out, for gutting it out. And so when it was time for his induction, Philip and I took him down there. We saw him get sworn in. We took pictures, very proud, because, Philip had a rocky year too, but he made it through, and we were able to see him off. He got on the bus, and they took him to the airport, and he flew to Fort Benning, Georgia, where he was supposed to do his basic training. And if you heard me, you said you would hear the word supposed to do.
That's the operative word here.
Now,
that
you're probably wondering,
is crumbling.
Yeah, no, it's getting kind of foggy. It ain't clear no more. Within 2 weeks, and I'll kind of fast forward it. Within 2 weeks, I get a phone call from Philip's commanding officer, and I'm at work. It was kind of like deja vu when he got arrested. I'm at work. I get this call on my cell phone from the commanding officer, and he tells me that unfortunately our son is not working out in boot camp, and we're going to generally discharge him because he's not mature enough for this.
Exactly right.
And I'm sitting here as if a camera's looking at me like, you're kidding me, right? You're kidding me. And again, it was no joke. And they were preparing him to get discharged. He didn't even make it out of reception, where you go in and get all your goods and everything. He didn't even make it out of that, because something happened where it caused him to say,
I'm not doing this.
We're not doing it.
Yeah. I think that the discharge, I'm using that term loosely for those who may be listening with a military background. Really, what he got in terms of being released from the military was as if he had never enlisted in the first place. I think they called it mental unreadiness. And what it basically boiled down to is that developmentally, Philip was too immature to handle the rigors of military life. And which is, if I say, it's really cool. I know fellas wish that it was like that years ago, but that is what they allowed, because it was a fully volunteer army. So they didn't want people there who were not going to work out.
Especially in wartime.
Yes, exactly. So they allowed Philip, he was being processed back out into civilian life. Now, having said that, Toni and I, based upon our plan A for everything.
We didn't have a plan B.
No.
And we knew he was coming home, and we had to figure it out. Now, pause there. We're going to go back to our daughter, Kyle.
Tag team.
We're going to tag team this. Now, first semester's over, and Kyle's grades aren't that great. Now, if you go back several podcasts, you'll know that Philip and I didn't have a great first semester in college either.
No.
To the point where second semester they says, we don't want you to come back. So we were in that light very understanding. Going to college, a large university, having a lecture hall of 300 or 400 people, it is overwhelming. And if you're not prepared for it, because she came from a very small school for the performing arts. So going to a lecture hall with all these people and, it's overwhelming. So when her grades were not exactly where we expected, we had grace and leniency because we understood. And we encouraged her, hey, Kyle, just go back in there. I told her, don't take any hard classes, maybe take 2 hard classes and 2 easy blow-off classes so that you can get your GPA back up, because that's pretty much what I did, but it didn't work either. So we were encouraging her because we understood that college it's hard. It's very hard.
Yes.
So we encouraged Kyle to go back and just put forth the best effort that she could. And she did. However, unfortunately, the grades still wasn't there when she completed her second semester. So, she decided that maybe school's not just for her right now. I remember when I was in high school and I was an honor student and I went to U of M for that first year. But to be perfectly honest, I wasn't ready. I got tired of school.
Because you were into Philip.
I was into you, man.
Mm-hmm.
So
she said school can wait.
Exactly. So I understood. And so Kyle made the decision, I'm just going to take a break. I'm going to go to work full time, which she did. She even was able to get a 2-bedroom apartment, which she did. And she began living her adult life at the age of 19. And I'm not mad at her about that.
No.
She did what she needed to do.
Exactly.
Now we go back to our son. We're going back and forth here. Now he is on his way home. They put him on a Greyhound bus. He didn't get no plane. He went on a plane. You're coming back on a bus. Government ain't paying for no plane. So, we're sitting up here wondering what on earth are we going to do? Because unbeknownst to you, the listening audience, Philip and I was in preparation to move to Phoenix, Arizona.
Yes, we were. That actually happened. It was a couple of things that happened with that. A couple of years, a year before Kyle graduated, Toni and I knew that our kids was getting older and that we wanted to take a last family trip. And I must admit that Toni put some pretty pennies together, and we decided to go to Phoenix, Arizona to vacation. Why Phoenix? Honey, tell them.
Because we have never been west of the Mississippi before. And I said, this would be a great opportunity because we may not be able to do it. Now, we didn't fly. We couldn't afford that. We got us a van. And all 4 of us got in that conversion van, and we traveled from Nashville, Tennessee. It took us Phoenix, 2 days to Phoenix, Arizona.
And it was great.
It was great. We went to every tourist location in Arizona, and we went in July, hot as all get out. I haven't experienced heat like that in my life. Talk about fire.
We understood the Ohio players now.
Yes.
But we had a great time out there.
We did.
And to Toni's credit, because she put this together.
It took me 6 months to put my pennies, got my income tax,
She sure did. But we went horseback riding. Mm-hmm. We took a pink Jeep tour trip.
Grand Canyon.
Yeah, we did all of it because our thinking was that we wouldn't be back here for decades. So we just wanted to do something, unbeknownst to us, that it would come a lot quicker than we thought.
Because we talked about it on the way back. Wow, this would be a pretty cool place to retire.
Exactly.
And of course we're still in our late 30s, early 40s, and that wasn't going to come for a while. Yeah. But again, when we got home and the kids, did their thing and graduated from high school, and Philip and I found ourselves on our front porch in Nashville. Yeah. And we both looked at each other kind of simultaneously and said, why not?
Yeah, and it came about because in terms of ministry that I was involved with in my church, it was there was like a plateau and almost stagnation. And I'm wondering, Lord, what do you want me to do? And he put it in my mind, go to Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying, why?
I said what? Why? He said why?
and to give you that, because 2 years prior, when Philip had to be homeschooled, I had an opportunity to start my own business. Mm-hmm. And truthfully, for the next 2 years, the business had been taken off, and I was doing very well on my own, doing consulting and training. And so to have God tell me, uproot everything, go to Phoenix for a work that he has for me to do.
This was kind of like deja vu, from Detroit to Nashville. We're doing this again.
Yeah, but being the humble servant and playing myself, look, I'm obedient. And so if God said, and I knew it was him, no doubt in my mind, Toni and I started to
pack it up.
Yep, because I said, Kyle's working. Philip will have to figure it out when he gets back here. Now, if that's cold as parenting, look, I embrace that. That's where we were at that time. So anyway.
So we did provide some things, and we can talk about that in the next episode. But yes, exactly. We were on our way to Phoenix, Arizona, as our son was coming home to Nashville. So stick with us for next time, because we've got more to share with you. Have a great one.
Yes, have a great rest of your week. This episode was produced and edited by Miss K. Simone. Cover graphics by Indefinite. Music by Miss K. Simone. So until next time, I'm Phil Bugs.
And I'm Toni Bugs.
Wishing you a wonderful week.